Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my live interview today. I am very excited to be sharing with you a gentleman named Raj Montage. He is an empath, he is a trauma survivor, and he is also a podcast host. He is one of the first podcasts I started listening to, and I'm very excited to share his story with you and why he started this podcast and what he's been through, and I'll just share him with you. He's a delightful gentleman. I just can't wait to share him with you. I'm going to bring him in here as soon as I can get myself together here. That's so funny. Oh, and I didn't say who I am. For those of you who don't know me, I am Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you with Raj Montage. I'm going to bring him in here right away.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, Raj, I can't see your face.
Now.
No, well, you were there for a minute. I love technology. Thank you for joining me today. I already tripped over myself. I actually like to get that out of the way right at the beginning. I forgot to say who I was because I don't always have the same people. So you always have to say who you are, right? And this is Raj Montage from the On-Call Empath with me, Danielle Burnock, today. Thank you, Raj. I told the people that you were one of the first podcasts I started listening to. So I'm just delighted to have you on my live today, and then you'll be on my podcast too. And just thank you. Thank you.
It's a true honor.
I wanted to, before we get started, just if you would share a little bit with the people, how you grew up and what kind of trauma it is that you've been fighting to overcome, just to give them a little taste of what you've been through and, share with them.
Sure. Well, it's still an ongoing process. So I feel like trauma is something that you keep on learning lessons and you build, just like you're building a house. When I started off, obviously coming from a different culture, we had certain expectations, norms, and not just like the family part. I'm talking about like the whole community. You're supposed to live up to certain expectations, go to school, get education, get married, have kids, and do that type of thing. And not everybody is molded for that. And I knew at a young age that I was a little different because I started doing things when I was small that was different. I was more left brain. I'd be more into music, more into art. I do all this stuff at school, and people would be like, "Wow, this guy could draw really well. You can play the guitar really well." And fast forward to today, that's what that's my hobbies, obviously. But what led me down this path of the on-call empath is, when I was young, I just didn't feel like I fit in because I was getting pulled in two different directions. I had to do expectations of my culture, my family, and then I had to switch. And when I went to like school and my friends, that was totally different because they're like, "Hey, how come you have to do this, and how come you gotta do this way and talk to your parents this way and go around the back door that way?" And I couldn't really explain to them like, this is how our culture is, because I'm East Indian, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the culture, I mean, at least when I was growing up, it's very, I'll just say it, it's very judgmental. They look at what you have, and you're a product of your family. So they expect you, and they push you in good ways to go to school, be very successful, make lots of money, make little babies, and make your parents proud. However, that can be very detrimental for somebody who, I wasn't very studious at school. I was never really good. I was always vigilant. And so one thing I want to point out is I was constantly on high alert in the classroom, at home. I just didn't feel like I could be myself. And so I didn't know what an empath was. I didn't know what a highly sensitive person was. Every time I talked about it to other people, they're like, "Dude, that's all in your head. Like, just toughen up, man. Grow up." And so those are the types of people I was surrounded by, like tough
Mm-hmm.
love. Unfortunately, those types of people when I grew up ended up, in certain areas in my workforce, and I'm sure you know what a narcissist is. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of attraction to narcissists, and so I started studying that. And I started looking really deeply into narcissism, what not to do, what to do, how to handle them, not to piss them off, not to be a supply, how to protect myself. And so empaths and narcissism go hand in hand, because a lot of empaths that I've coached and talked to on my podcast, they all say that they have abilities, natural abilities, but they always attract like narcissists or people that are not good for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's how I kind of went into the empath role. And so it started from a young age. I had no idea like what empath was, HSP. Then I started looking into it more, and now at this stage, I'm fully invested into being proud to be an empath, not ashamed, and I can tell people like, I have boundaries. I need my time. I may need stuff longer to process things and feel comfortable, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just as capable as anybody else. And this podcast is a reflection of that, and the thousands of people that listen to it, and tell me like, yeah, I can resonate with that guy, and that's why I do it.
Wow. Now, you had shared some of your story with me before, and I wanted to ask you to share with the other people. What did you do to cope with your challenges of your identity and the not measuring up and then not being able to be yourself? How did you cope with that in ways
Mhm.
that didn't work for you?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of trial and error. So I've tried everything underneath the sun, from therapy to going into men's group, then just looking into different spiritual practices, natural medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So I've tried like the spectrums of things. What resonated me, the most was being true to myself, and being one with nature, and being true to myself, being able to coach myself. Now, back then, I didn't know how to coach anyone, let alone myself. Like, I was a mess. Like, I would keep going to people like, hey, please help me, and be vulnerable. Now, one thing I want to say is you got to be careful who you go and who you trust, because I've been to some people, even therapists, that have told me like, don't even bother going to college. You're just not made. You're not college material. You might as well just start working at a grocery store. And I can remember this guy's face, and he's still in the area. He's a lot older now, but that is something that's ingrained in the back of my head. Those words that came out, and that moment, I knew that something was different. I started questioning myself. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's not. Like, but it took me to fall on my face and trying many things, many modalities to figure out that sometimes experts are wrong,
Oh,
and I'm living
definitely. Your story
living
of what
proof.
you're sharing of what the therapist said to you, I mean, which was just
Mhm.
wrong. Reminds
And
me
not to
of
say, yeah.
a ballerina, Misty Copeland. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she got this she applied to some ballet school. I don't know the name of it. It's not important, but it was big to her, and it was where she wanted to go to ballet school. She wanted to be a ballerina. Well, they told her she not only couldn't go to school there, but they told her you cannot be a ballerina, as if they had the right to
Mm,
say that, because you don't have the body of a ballerina. And she went and became a phenomenal ballerina.
yeah.
And
I love
because
those stories.
she owned it as, like, you can't not make me. And that's what owning your life is. That's what you did. You came to a point where you embodied a quote that I love by Carol Burnett that's like, only I can change my life. Nobody can do it
Yeah,
for me. And you did that.
yeah.
You're like, you told me how you came to a point where it's like, if my life's going to change, I have to do something about it. Right. So what brought you to that point of like, today's the day, or I'm going to own it? What brought you to
Right.
that point?
That's a very good question because I get asked that from a lot of people, and so one of the things that was like an aha moment, if you want to call it that,
Mhm.
was, I hit the bottom. I had to hit the rock bottom. Like I was at a point where I wasn't functioning. I wasn't getting up. I wasn't taking care of my body. I had no regimen. I was just all over the place. And I just
Wow.
had to sit down and really ask myself, and journaling really helped me with this, was, what is it that I want? And why do I want to get better? Like, what is my why? And
Yeah.
so I ask every person, even on my podcast, I tell people out there, what is your why? Why do you get up and go to work? Why are you a mother to your kids? Why do you think that's important? Or why do you want to do such a great job for somebody who doesn't care about you so much? So once I started asking these questions of why,
Hmm.
then the answers started coming very clearly. And it didn't happen overnight. I had to go through, like I said, not only just therapists but doctors, because I had physical ailments, back issues, migraines, all the physical part, but that was all tied into my nervous system. And I talk about TMS a lot, where it's the mind body is connected as one.
Hmm.
So once I started studying that everything is linked. Every pain that I had, it wasn't serious, but my brain was telling me like, hey, danger, danger.
Hmm.
And that was from past trauma. And so
Yeah.
I got to the point where I started to say, okay, what do I have to do to coach myself? Because I've asked every person, I've watched every YouTube video, I've read a couple books. It's like we could do all that, but if we don't take action, nothing's going to change.
Exactly. That's something I always say is you have to do the work. I did one of these before, and there's that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And people
Yeah,
can buy the book, but if they don't do what it says, if you can go to counseling, but if you don't follow the directions, if you don't do the work, it takes a lot of work, doesn't
yeah,
it?
it does. And I even tell people that listen to the podcast, it's like you can listen all you want and write down notes, but if you don't actually take action and do it, it's more just like you're just thinking that something's going to fall on your lap. And unfortunately, the universe doesn't work that way. You have to put in the work, even if it means failing and sucking at something that you're not good at. The fact that you're doing something, that counts the most.
Right. You can't steer a car that's parked. I mean, you could try, but you're going to wear out those tires just, doing. But when you're moving, then you're like, oh, well, then you can back up. You can turn around. That's what we do
Sure.
with how bad do you want it? One of the core values of my organization, Victorious Souls, is a warrior mindset. And
Hmm.
it's so important. It's like, how bad do you want it? Do you want,
Hmm.
you discovered your why. You were looking for your why. And it's such good advice. And pause here and address you, my listening audience. What is your why? And if you don't have a why, start asking yourself why questions. Ask other people why questions. Prime the pump in
Hmm.
yourself to get the why answers coming out. I know there's I think it's Toyota that they have a 5-step why, a process to get to the bottom of a problem that I learned through my mentor, Kerry Oberbrunner. It's in his book Unhackable, which I'm a certified coach for. They were in his show up filled up. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's just I got it from him. The 5 questions. It's like, well, the thing doesn't work. Well, why? Because this part broke. Well, why did that part break? Because, and then it leads to this other reason. Well, because it doesn't have this piece on it. Well, why doesn't it have this piece on it? Well, because it doesn't work with that. Well, and it all got
Right.
back to there was a filter that was missing is why the whole thing broke. But you had to ask why to get to the bottom of it. And sometimes we
Hmm.
can be so hard on ourselves. We want the answer with the first why.
Well, I wanted answers right away. Like,
Yeah.
if it didn't work, it's not working. But the thing is, you have to do it thousands of times and keep on just plugging away. Because if one avenue was like closed, I would, most of the time I would just give up and to be like, it's not working. But just the moment I started looking at different avenues, different ways to go around things, asking more than just why do I think that I should do something,
Mm-hmm.
then it gets to the point where you're just like, okay, this is not, there's no magic pill. Like I can't just snap my fingers and be cured. It doesn't work that. I wish it was that easy, but with trauma, it's a life process.
Right. And it's how much did it affect and how long did it take you to get there? And then life happens while we're on our journey.
Mhm.
Like this last
Yeah.
year and a half of COVID, that's throwing trauma out in the world. And
Mhm.
so throw that on top of the pile. And
Mhm.
every day we have to learn something new and how to,
Mhm.
shift our life around the things,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and I tell people it's not a race. I'm not trying to compare my healing with some people out there myself. I'm going to heal on my own time frame, and that could be in my 80s, 90s, 100. Who knows? It could be
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow. But I'm focusing just on myself. I'm not saying that there's a timeline that you have to follow. You're going to heal when you're ready.
Right. Right. And we're not ready for certain parts of healing at a certain time. It's,
And
you
that's
have to
okay.
go through the layers. You
Yeah.
can't go to the center without going through the layers to get there.
Yeah,
Peel it back
exactly.
like an onion, and then when you do that, you cry. What do you do with onions? And so crying is part of the process too, but tears are actually
Sure.
very healing. I've learned that tears they have a different molecular makeup for why you're crying. There's been a study done, you look at them under the
I heard of that.
microscope, and they look different. If you're crying because you're happy, you're sad, you're angry, you're frustrated, they all look different. So they are therapy. So
Yeah.
now, I wanted to ask you, um, when did you start your podcast so that people can hear? When did you start it? Why
Mhm.
did you start it? And why do you focus on highly sensitive people and empaths?
Good question. Right before the pandemic, um, I had a lot of ideas in my head, and I wanted to start some movement, and I wanted to speak in my voice. And this is a story that I think I've told a couple of people on my podcast. Is I don't know if you believe in, like, people. Some people are here on this planet to kind of guide you or nudge you. Um, and I think that I had to go through couple people where they kept telling me, like, you have to get your voice out there. Everything that you're saying, all that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
imagine if you can share it with the world. Your voice needs to be a microphone. And I remember this one conversation with this one lady that I was talking to, and she just kept pushing me. She's like, just just do like something, like do like a podcast or a recording. And I told her I just don't have the confidence. I don't want people to know like what I've been through. It's embarrassing. Who's gonna listen anyways?
But she
Well,
kept encouraging you.
and I had no idea why. And so I do feel that there's certain people, key people that come into our lives that make us, or maybe if we're lost, they kind of nudge you to
Mm-hmm.
the direction of your purpose. Because I had no direction, and she just kept saying, why don't you do it? Why don't you do it?" And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do one episode, and that's it. And I sound like crazy, and so I did it, and it sounded so bad that I erased it. And then I was like, I sound terrible. Like, who wants to listen to my voice? So then she got back on, and she's like, just trust me. Just do it one more time and don't think about it. Don't edit it. Just let it come out. So I did. And I remember the first episode that I did, it was just me, myself. There was no guests. And I just let it rip. And then when I did that, I got a lot of good feedback from random people, from people on Facebook. And I was like, wait a minute, I think I might be onto something. Let me try a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one. And 100 episodes later, hundreds, even yourself was on my podcast. I've had hundreds of people, and it's ranked now in the top 10. How would I have gotten that far if it wasn't for that one person trying to nudge me? Not to say like she was the reason why I did it, And
No,
the
she
funny
was
part
just
is,
a part of your story, and she was a key part of your story. I believe God puts people in our lives for
yeah,
stuff like that. And I believe you were put in my life because you were one of the first podcasts I started listening to. I've had people tell me to start a podcast
uh,
for a long time. And actually listening to yours is what encouraged me to start
oh,
mine. So I want
that
to
means so
thank
much
you
to me.
for listening to that lady. I'm thankful
Yeah.
for that lady who came into your
Well,
life and encouraged you. And it's like, and how these are
yeah.
ripple effects. You throw a rock in a pond, you get ripples. And so it's just going to ripple good all over the place.
Here's the kicker on that story where I'm going to leave you with. After I started getting going, I never heard from her again. And that was really unsettling for me. I don't know, like her number was disconnected. She was calling from a Canadian number,
Hmm.
and we were talking for weeks. And I met her in a support group. But then once I started to get the ball rolling, it felt like she came to do one thing, and then once that was done, she removed
Huh,
herself, and
interesting.
I
Yeah.
I just knew her first name, Katerina, and that was it. So if she's listening, thank you.
Well, there you go. Maybe she is. Hopefully. I don't know. COVID happened to a lot of people. It was a hard year. So,
Yeah.
but you focus on the highly sensitive people and the empaths. Is that because you wrestled with that part of your life growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know or identify as an empath until probably a couple like years ago. I
Hmm.
mean, it took me some time to study it because at first I'm like, what is an empath? Like, I don't know. And so I started reading about it, and it's basically somebody that has abilities to read people. So I can be in a room and I can see someone's body language, how they're crossing their arms, how they're looking at you, the vibe that they get. I naturally, when I see somebody that has a negative vibe, like I
Hmm.
start to get tired, I start to like withdraw. So these things, I didn't know why that was happening to me. Like every time I go near somebody that was toxic or a narcissist,
Hmm.
I would start to feel kind of sick. I'd have some pain. And so I started writing it down. I'm like, wait a minute, this has something to do with, you know, empaths and highly sensitive people. And then when I got involved with the community online, there's a whole world full of empaths, highly sensitive people, where when they were small, they were, a lot of them went through trauma and they had to figure out how to survive.
Hmm.
And so you don't have to be an empath or a highly sensitive person to really get, to identify trauma in a certain way. I feel like even if you went through any type of trauma, you could still have these natural abilities,
Hmm.
and you can be very good at reading people. And it's basically following your gut and trusting your gut. And that's why that really resonated with me. And then once I got hooked up with the community, I'm like, I'm going to run with it. And it it's good to feel being identifiable with something, and so I identify that through my podcast.
That's awesome. I'm really glad about that. I had read the book Highly
Yeah,
Sensitive People, which HSP or however that was. It was the first time I'd heard that term because I grew up with constantly being belittled for being too sensitive and
yeah,
things. And I'm very sensitive to touch and stuff. Like, I don't know if you ever
yeah.
heard the nursery rhyme, or not nursery rhyme, the like a children's story of Princess and the Pea. I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but some princess, I don't know why she was going where she was, but she ended up this house and there was a pea. And she was being tested if she was a real princess, if she could feel the pea under the mattress. And there's like 20 mattresses on this bed or something, she could still feel the pea. It's like, if I say that, I'll like feel a hair on my skin, or, I'm real sensitive to stuff like that. And I always think of that story. Um, so the princess and the pea, she was a highly sensitive person too.
Yeah, and it's a
So,
superpower.
yeah,
That's what
it
else I
is.
found out. I mean, I
Yeah.
used to be like, oh, I'm damaged goods, or I don't want people to know about it. But now I'm just like, dude, I can do stuff that if more people did it, we wouldn't be in so much
Oh,
turmoil, I
yeah.
guess you could say, with the world. I mean, yeah, because I mean, we tend to put people first, which you know, kind of works against us. But once you learn to keep your boundaries and stop people pleasing, putting yourself, and that's a process, and that's hard for empaths and highly sensitive people to do, because we're wired a certain way, because we tend to want to please and not
Mhm.
rock the boat and not upset people. But I'm happy to say I'm at a point where I can just say no and not explain myself and smile and walk away, where I couldn't do that a year ago. I mean, I'm like, I bet I got to work that extra shift, or I'm not going to get a raise, or if I'm not nice to this person, they're going to be upset with me, and I can't live with myself having someone upset with me. I read a quote yesterday. It says, if everyone likes you, you have bigger problems. So,
Wow.
so I'm trying to get people not to like me. So,
Trying to get people
if
not
that
to like
makes
me.
sense.
That's a new thing. Well, I have to remember that. That's really cool. So, wow. I had a question here and it just eluded me for a second. Because I just got off on that. Make people not like me.
Yeah, because we want people to like us so much we get sick over it. Like,
Mm,
oh my God, hundreds of people like me, but this one person that doesn't, can't
mm.
sleep at night. Or I
Oh,
get one
wow.
bad comment on my podcast, like this episode was terrible, but I got all the other good ones. I can't. I'm like very critical. But once I started to let go and be like, that's okay. In fact, bad publicity, negativity, if I'm not having a lot of that, then I'm not doing it right. I have to have, both, yin and yang. You got to have a little bit
Yeah.
of both. Can't be all
Yeah.
good and perfect.
Yeah. I've been told
Perfectionism.
you haven't
Yeah.
gotten any, you haven't made any traction until you've gathered some haters.
Yeah.
So you got to try and get the haters too, huh?
They're probably one of the reason that boosts a lot of my analytics, because when I mean, I don't get a lot, but like when I do answer them, and I'm like, please explain yourself. I want to know. I'm truly interested in why you thought it was like not resonating with you, or oh, because this and that. And a lot of times they have internal problems and they're going through a lot themselves. So once you open the ear to them, then you'll see like the real person come out, and they're like, hey, maybe I was a little too hard. And all that it took was for me to be like, because people like to be heard.
Oh,
And that's
right.
one thing I will tell you, after 100 episodes, people like to talk. They like to talk about themselves, their stories. And I like to listen. So it's
Mhm.
perfect storm. And so I think it's very therapeutic as well to listen to other people, because a lot of times I'll just listen and just shut my mouth, and I'll learn from it. Or before, I'm like, oh, I don't need to learn all that. And so once I opened my mind that there's many ways to skin a cat to heal. I mean, you just don't have to go the medical route and therapy and medication, which for some is perfect, and there's nothing
Right.
wrong with that. But
Oh,
for
I
me,
agree. I mean,
it just
trauma is
wasn't right.
personal. That's one of my quotes from my book. Trauma is personal, but so is healing. Healing is
Yeah.
personal because everyone is different. We're all unique creations, and we're all different. We
Mhm.
all have different fingerprints. I mean, we're all so
Yeah.
unique. And you had mentioned how, a year ago, you couldn't do what you do now. And I just want to bring up to my audience here for them to notice that you are on video today, which a year ago you were not on video either. And so I want to encourage them with, wherever you're at in your journey, just keep moving forward, and you take one more step, and then you look back a year from now and you go, wow, look what I did. And I just, like Raj here, a year ago he wasn't on video. So I didn't even ask him, because I do these videos. And as soon as I saw him on video, I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, Raj, come.
Yeah,
Come on
I
our
remember
podcast.
that. When you were one of my first couple episodes, and I remember telling you that this is only audio, and I felt really cringy like saying it like that. I'm like, I hope she doesn't think, like, because I wanted to do video, and I think you knew that, because I
Uh-huh.
told you that I might do it in the future. But once I opened the floodgates and people like yourself was giving me encouragement, hey, it's nice to see who's behind the On-Call Empath. So I always had these sunglasses on, or I'd be covering my face. And the minute I took the mask off and the sunglasses off, it was just, I was addicted. I'm like, hey, it's not that bad. And so I want to thank you personally for helping me with that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm delighted that you're doing that. And it's like that. Once you do it, like you did your first audio, you said
Oh, yeah.
you deleted the first one, but then once you put it out there, and that's one of the reasons why I want to do mine live, why I do so many things live. I do very little pre-recorded of anything, because you can't edit live. You can't edit live. You are just here live, and they get you how you are. And it reminds them that you're human. It reminds me that I'm human, because nobody's perfect. And we need to remember that, because we fall into that. Somehow we think that we need to be perfect. And it's even heightened when you've been through trauma. But I think everyone falls into that. But so it's like, however we can constantly climb over, I'm a human. I have this affirmation thing that I give to people, says your humanity is showing just like everybody else's.
What I like about you is you're very transparent with a lot of your content. And that's what kind of drew me to you, to have you on my podcast, because you're like, whatever happens, happens. And that's why with these lives, it's like, you're being genuine. And that's for empaths. We like that. We admire that, because that's what it's all about. It's showing people that off camera, you're the same person, because you are. Like when I talk to you on the phone or before this, you're the same as you are in camera. And that, I think, is really tough, especially with social media, because you'll have two sides. I've heard a lot of people that are one way and then they'll talk to a certain another way. But if you're constantly the same on camera and off camera, people will flock to you. And I think that's why you're so successful in what you do. And I think a lot of the audience, they're smarter than we think, and they'll know, and they can see through BS. So I think you got that going for you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. So tell the audience how people can connect with you. Where can they find you online? How can they connect with you?
Well, you can join the Facebook group. You can type in the On-Call Empath. I have an Instagram page, the On-Call Empath. I have a podcast. You can go on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. I would be honored for anyone to listen to it, give me feedback. So just type in the On-Call Empath on Google, and you'll see a bunch of stuff come up on social media. I have Twitter. I just opened another account on Reddit. So just many ways to contact me. And so yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being with me today, Raj.
Absolutely. It was an honor. And I look forward to having you on my podcast again in the future. So.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that. I just love chatting with you. And I know that everybody loved having you today. So thank you so much. I'll talk to you in a couple minutes.
All right. Keep up the great work.
Thanks. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening today, for watching today, for being with us today. I know that it was a great time with Raj. I love speaking with him about, what he's doing with the On-Call Empath, and how we can just support one another and encourage one another, and to help people to stand up for themselves, and to ask yourself why. Why are you struggling? Why are you getting up in the morning? Why do you want to do what you do? Ask yourself questions. Questions are the tools of the explorer. So I want to encourage you, until next time, to use questions in your life, explore the parts of your life, so you can take ownership of your life and you can really live. And so until next time, I'm Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. Mwah.